Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Tia, and today I'm going to be sharing 5 knits that are perfect for using up some of that scrap yarn that you might have lying around the house. I know I have accumulated quite a bunch. Here is my little bag of year-to-date scrap yarn from my projects that I've knit this year. So I have a couple of balls of silk mohair from both Isair and Knitting for Olive. I have this Kamarose Snefnug, and I have a couple balls of Knitting for Olive Merino. I actually have 3 colors, one in gray lamb, one in soft blue, and one in coal. Because I want to use up some of this scrap yarn before I start to accumulate more and it gets out of hand, I wanted to look up some projects that I could knit up that would use up some of this scrap yarn, and I thought it might be helpful to share them with you as well. Before we hop in, I want to mention what I'm wearing. I am wearing my hand knit camisole number 5. It's a pattern by My Favorite Things Knitwear, and I knit this in Knitting for Olive Merino in the color coal. So the first pattern that I found that I think would be perfect for scrap yarn is the Honey Clutch by Petite Knit. It's the perfect clutch for holding your knitting materials, so stitch markers, DPNs, etc. It's a really great size for knitting accessories and especially for travel. And I just thought this clutch is beautiful, and it's perfect for scrap yarn because it only uses less than a ball each of the 2 yarns that are used held together. So I guess I'll get into that first. The suggested yarns are Sunday by Sadness Garn, Saga by Filcolana, or Pelsud by a brand that I'll put here on the screen. And all these suggested yarns are fingering yarns held together with a silk mohair. So really you can probably use any fingering weight yarn for this project. I actually think I'm going to knit one in this ball that I have left over from my Monday sweater. This is the Knitting for Olive Merino in soft blue, and I think I'll just pair it with, I have a lot of actually various gray colored silk mohairs left over from various projects, so I think I'll just use one of those to hold it together. It requires about 24 to 36 grams of the fingering weight yarn, depending on what kind of yarn you're using. And each of the suggested yarns and my yarn as well comes in a 50-gram ball, and so that would be less than 1 ball of your fingering weight yarn. And then for the silk mohair, it requires between 15 to 16 grams of that silk mohair or any lace weight yarn, and typically from lace weight yarn that I've bought or silk mohair that I've bought, those come in 25-gram balls, and so it does require less than and almost or just over half of a ball of your silk weight. So a little bit about the construction. The honey clutch is worked from the bottom up, and the bottom is knit in double knitting, and then you pick up the stitches around the bottom and you knit in the round in honeycomb brioche. And that's what I really like about this pattern. I think it's the perfect pattern if you're newer to knitting honeycomb brioche, or even if you've knit it before and you just want to practice your technique. I think it's a great pattern for working honeycomb brioche in kind of like a smaller version, or lower stakes, if you will, so not knitting a full sweater. And the top of the clutch is worked in double knitting as well, and then the 2 plackets for the zipper are knitted on each side. So that's one thing to note about this clutch, is that there is some sewing involved. So you have to sew on the zipper, and then there's a lining that you have to sew in as well. So just a note in case you're newer to sewing, that some sewing is required in this project. And so I think the last thing to note about this is that even though it is a smaller project, it is definitely not a beginner project or simple by any means. There's some techniques that are a little bit more advanced, like the stitch of the honeycomb brioche, again the sewing and the zipper installation. So just things to note if you do decide to work on this project. I have the yarn for it, so I think I might endeavor it and brave some of those newer techniques, and I just think that the pattern overall in the project is going to be more forgiving as a clutch than if I were to practice these on a sweater. Oh, and this is knitted on 2.5 millimeter needles, which is a US 1.5, and you can use circular needles and do magic loop, or you can also have double pointed needles in also a 2.5 millimeter size. The next 2 patterns that I wanted to share are actually both fingerless gloves, but they are worked in different stitch patterns and look quite distinct, and so I thought I would just share them both. The first fingerless glove pattern that I found that would be really great for using up scrap yarn are the Palea Gloves by Katarina Lindhagen, I believe. And she has two versions of this pattern, one in a fingering and one in a DK. So again, it is really perfect for you to just kind of use any yarn that you have in either of those weights lying around. The suggested yarns are sock yarns. So she suggests the Malabrigo yarn sock, the Flora Yarns Flora Favorite sock, and Organic Knitter's Step Coriadale sock yarn. I've actually never heard of those sock yarns, but I'm sure you can use any fingering or DK weight sock yarn for this pattern. I was looking at the projects on Ravelry just to see how much of that sock yarn you would need to use both, to knit both, and typically I saw folks were able to knit these fingerless gloves in about 0.8 skeins or 0.8 balls or less of those yarns. So anything around that quantity that you have left over would work. And then a little bit about the actual design and construction. These are knit mostly in 3x1 ribbing, and so it has that beautiful detail throughout. They're worked in the round seamlessly from bottom up, and the thumb gusset is created by symmetrical increases worked in stockinette stitch. And both mittens are worked in the same way, obviously. So those are a great option. And then I also saw that these last minute hand stolpen gloves by Suzanne Mueller, and I think these are really beautiful as well. I actually think if I were to knit fingerless gloves, I would knit these ones. I love the stockinette simplicity and the ribbing details of this one. So this pattern comes in sizes small, medium, and large. It's a beginner-friendly pattern. The handcuffs are knitted in the round with double pointed needles, 3.5mm for the cuffs and 4mm for the hand portion of the glove. It says the techniques that are used are Italian stitch cast on, left and right leaning increases, and Italian bind off. So again, beginner friendly knit if you've knit any beginner sweater pattern, or really even if you've just knit a simple scarf. I think these are totally doable for beginner project. And the suggested yarn that she uses are Rowan Alpaca Soft DK or Pasquale Tibetan, but really any DK weight yarn should work here. And the next pattern that I wanted to share is also a pattern by Suzanne Mueller. This is her I Love Stripes bandana, and it is a small, simple triangular scarf with a striped pattern. She mentions that it is perfect as a scarf with blouses, t-shirts, also works well as a headscarf or a hairband. And I think you can even tie it around a bag or a purse or even a tote, and that would look really cute as a bag accessory. Yeah, it's just the perfect little accessory for spring and summer. And so this is knit in, at least her pattern suggests knitting it in a knitting for olive pure silk, or also in Lamana Verona. I actually have some pure silk. Well, it's not on me. I'm knitting blouse number 1 right now by My Favorite Things Knitwear, and I'm using Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in the color Wheat. And I did order an extra ball. Well, the pattern called for the size small 7 balls of Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, but I did look at the projects on Ravelry, and from what I could tell there, most knitters used about 5 to 6 balls, but I ordered the 7 anyways just in case I needed the extra length for my blouse. But if I do have 1 ball left over, I think I will be knitting this bandana. The sample is knit in 2 colors, and it's two-toned with a primary color and a contrasting color, but if I knit it with my leftover blouse number 1 yarn, I'll probably just knit it in 1 color, which the pattern says you can do as well. You just don't switch the colors, obviously. So if you're just knitting it in 1 color, you could actually use 1 ball, which would be sufficient to knit the entire scarf. And if you're knitting in 2 colors, something that she mentions, which I think is really great, is that if you have 2 full balls of the suggested yarns, you can actually knit two-tone or 2-color bandanas as long as you alternate colors. So for the first, you would use the main color in color A and the alternating color in color B, and then for the second, you would use the main color in color B, and etc. So I think this scarf is really great. Also, if you're new to color work and you want to practice your color work, it's a great kind of little project to do so. The scarf is knitted in a stripe pattern. Obviously, if you're doing the 2-color one, from top center to the tip with wide stripes knitted in stocking stitch, and then in the main color, and then the alternating narrow stripes are knitted in garter stitch. For the finish around the edge, the scarf is edged with an I-cord, and it's knitted in 3mm circular needles. And the last pattern that I wanted to share with you is the Dahlia Hair Tie Bow by Isabel Cecilia. It is a free pattern, and it is the most darling little bow pattern made with 2 strands of lace weight yarn held together. It is a teeny pattern, so it only requires 6 to 12 grams of lace weight yarn. It's worked in US 4 or 3.5 millimeter needles, and the suggested yarns are Hedgehog Fibers Kid Silk Lace, Camarose Manistral, and My Knitted Closet the Silk Mohair, but really you could use any lace weight or any silk mohair. I think this is a really great gift knit. I know for me, I'm pretty selective with who I gift knit to. I want to make sure that who I'm knitting for is someone that's going to really appreciate the knitting, and also someone that I'm close to, since a lot of times these bigger projects like this, I knit this camisole for my sister, and it probably took me like 40 hours to knit and was so tedious, but it's so rewarding. She mentioned she wore it to work the other day and her coworkers complimented her outfit, and when she told her that I knit it, they were in awe, which is always such a nice feeling, and they said that they wanted to buy one from me, which is a really sweet sentiment. So that's why I think this pattern is a really great gift knit, because I can't imagine that it takes too long to knit. It's a really small hair tie bow, so it probably knits up really quick, especially on the US 4 needles. Yeah, I just thought it would be a really sweet like party favor idea, or just like a gift topper, or something nice to give to a friend or family member and use up that like teeny bit of leftover lace weight yarn that you might have from a project. So those are all the knitting projects I had to share with you. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Bye!